Thomas Hardy's poem, Are You Digging on My Grave, is written in the form of a dialogue. It was first published in the Saturday Review in 1913. The first two lines of the poem present a certain mystery to the reader. Who is asking this question? Is it indeed a person in the grave, or is it a person imagining an experience that might happen after they die? This mystery helps to draw the reader into the poem, though we will soon understand that the speaker is indeed a woman who is dead and buried. The reference to the rue being planted by the woman's loved one seems an important detail. The word rue has two essential meanings. First, rue means sorrow or regret. So the woman might be indicating that her loved one is experiencing these emotions. Initially, the speaker seems to feel that her death has caused sorrow for the loved one and that she remains strong in his memory. Rue is also the name of a shrub having bitter, strongly scented leaves. This definition of rue seems to hint at the nature of the relationship between the woman and the loved one. The bitter plant contrasts with the beautiful flowers that are often placed on graves. And this contrast becomes stronger when we remember that flowers are a traditional symbol of love and purity. In other words, the speaker doesn't imagine the man offering a remembrance of beauty and affection, just one of bitterness. The speaker's first question is answered by the digger of her grave. Though the digger's identity is unknown at this point in the poem, the anonymous speaker becomes an important factor in the poem, urging the reader to push on and discover who is talking to the woman. What's made clear in the first stanza is that this voice does not belong to the loved one that the woman thought she was addressing. This is indicated by the use of the third person he to refer to the man. The voice explains that the woman's loved one, perhaps a husband or a lover, has married another woman. He has married a very wealthy mate and appears to be doing quite well without woman in the grave. The digger quotes the words of the loved one, and the man states that his recent marriage will have no effect upon the deceased woman. In all of these, the woman in the grave wants to believe that others are thinking of her following her death. In reality, however, she has been largely forgotten. Hardy uses these ironic reversals to create a somewhat humorous tone, and this type of unexpected switch is often used to make people laugh. The next stanza again begins with the variation of the refrain, Who is digging on my grave? The word then moves the poem forward as it enables the narrator to discount the lover and move forward other possibilities. She chooses members of her family and imagines that they are remembering her by caring for her grave. Again, the voice answers the woman, telling her that her relatives are not the ones she hears digging. Instead, they think that it's pointless to tend her grave, as no amount of care will raise her from the dead. Again, there is the variation of the refrain, Are you digging on my grave? But this time it is not as definitive. The speaker is more hesitant, as if she doubts herself. She also seems to be more desperate to find someone who remembers her. Since her loved one and her relatives have forsaken her memory, she imagines that the digging is being done by a woman she disliked in her life, perhaps a rival. While there was ill feeling between the two, it seems that the buried woman finds some solace in the idea that her enemy is still concerned enough with her presence to cause some kind of harm to her grave. The reference to passing the gate is another term for the woman's death. Hardy's use of the phrase seems to allude to the idea of the pearly gates that theoretically mark the entrance to heaven. He does not present a glorified picture of this passageway. Instead, the gate shuts on all flesh, a phrase that suggests death is like a trap, not a place where one receives heavenly rewards. Here, the unknown voice presents one of the most direct and most chilling statements of the poem's central idea. The deceased woman has been forgotten by the living and does not concern them at all. In the next stanza, the woman finally gives up her game of trying to guess who is digging on the grave and asks a direct question of the unknown voice. Here, the identity of the unknown speaker is revealed. Until now, the reader has been involved in the mystery of who might be speaking to the woman. Hardy uses the unexpected and humorous twist of having a dog be the individual who is speaking. He creates another ironic setup in the following stanzas to once again show that the woman has little importance in the living world. The fifth stanza is given over completely to the woman who talks of the dog's loyalty. This is the woman's longest stretch of unbroken commentary in the poem, and it serves to build up the reader's expectations for the ironic conclusion in the final paragraph. In a sense, this final situation is exactly the same as the ones that have preceded it. The woman's explanation for the digging shows that she wants her former acquaintances to remember her and be touched by her death. The reality is the opposite. They have little concern for her now that she is gone. In the final stanza, Hardy takes the poem to its highest level of satire, as the dog indicates that the bone is more important than his former mistress. The mention of the bone also suggests the way in which those in the living world now view the woman. She is simply a pile of bones buried in the ground and no longer has importance to those she used to know. In the final lines, Hardy drives home his central point. The woman has been forgotten by those she once knew. Thomas Hardy's "Ah, are you digging on my grave?" paints a bleak picture of human nature. Human feelings, according to the poem, are utterly transient. Death means not only the end of physical existence, but extinction in the hearts of the living as well. The tone of the poem is set immediately in the first line. In typical Hardy fashion, it is spoken by a dead woman who is awakened in her grave by the sound of someone scratching at the dirt above. One by one, her illusions are shattered. None of them seem to care for her anymore. Even her dog, who is digging there, chose the spot by chance, not because his former mistress was buried there. The narrative of the poem presents a pessimistic view of human nature, but this viewpoint is undercut to a large degree by other elements in the poem, structure and language that Hardy uses as an ironic commentary on the sentimentality of the Victorian era. The woman draws our compassion and our ridicule, and this sets up a tug of war between high feeling and ridicule. In the end, ridicule wins out. The authenticity of the noble emotions is thrown into doubt. By the time the poem concludes, the dead woman's sensibility has been exposed as a cliche, and Hardy's readers are forced to confront their own feelings in the same light. The poem is composed of 6 stanzas, each containing 6 lines. The first line of each stanza is a variation of the question, "Are you digging on my grave?" The repetition of this line gives continuity to the poem and provides a refrain that is similar to the repeated phrases that are used in songs. The design of the first 3 stanzas of the poem are also identical in how the dialogue between the 2 speakers is presented. The first 2 lines of these stanzas consist of a question asked by the woman buried in the grave, while the remaining lines consist of a reply to the question. Quotation marks are used to signify the beginning and end of each speaker's words. The last 2 stanzas of the poem vary this structure, each stanza being devoted to a single speaker. but the dialogue between the two characters remains the central organizational element throughout the poem.